So caffeine right now is kind of having a negative time in the spotlight. But what people forget is that caffeine is one of the oldest known nootropics that people have been consuming for its nootropic benefit, in history. We like it because it increases your alertness, it increases your blood flow, it actually improves athletic performance. So caffeine is not like just a bad thing, but it can be bad in certain contexts. So here's a crazy statistic. 3 in 4 Americans had coffee yesterday. Coffee was the number one beverage. It was above tap water and bottled water. It is the number one drink that Americans drink on a daily basis. I really do believe in your gut feeling, and it shouldn't be the only deciding factor. You need to take in a lot of different data points, but if something feels weird in your gut, trust that instinct and then reverse engineer why maybe you got there after the fact. There's this book called The Gift of Fear by Gavin DeBeck. He's a former FBI, and what he did is he did this big study and determined that gut instinct will save your life. When you're going through training and you're doing hard stuff, it's really easy to feel sorry for yourself and be thinking about oh my God, this is so hard, I'm in so much pain, me, I want to stop, I'm tired, I'm cold, I'm this. Once you start reframing that to be who's struggling, who can I help out? Oh, that dude's lagging. Let me go give him a little hand, see if I can give him a push. As soon as you kind of take your focus away from you and me and feeling sorry for me, and you start looking towards other people, all of a sudden you get new springs of energy. It's so tough, dude. It's also really tough. Trying to bootstrap your way up, it really makes a difference. You got seed round of $1.2 million, that's something that you can really use to go acquire direct to consumer online. So we kind of have a two-pronged approach. We have our D2C, so direct to consumers through our website, and then our B2B, which includes going back to special operations training. There's a lot of misconceptions about people will say things like it's 99% mental, 1% physical, or it's all in your head, or just don't quit. These type of sort of overly simplistic idioms. And while there's to those claims, there's a kernel of truth in all of those, I believe that military training and special operations stuff, it's a learned skill. All of these things you can get better at. If you suck at running, you can get better at running. If you're struggle, under load, when you're with a bunch of weight on top of you and moving, and you can get better at that. There's a lot of these things, so it is a trained skill. And in business, it's kind of the same way.
I just wrapped up my conversation with Jordan Ryan, and Jordan is a really special individual. So Jordan is a military veteran who had a career in the special ops, and I just want to give a quick shout out to all the veterans out there, especially on this Memorial Day weekend. We here at the Business of Blumin podcast love our veterans. So back to Jordan, an injury actually sidelined him, unfortunately. And while he was injured, he just realized that conventional medicine wasn't working. He was working with typical doctors and on typical kind of pharmaceutical drugs and just didn't feel right. So he ended up studying plant medicine and holistic health. And once he started doing this, he realized that he felt much better taking natural medicine as opposed to some of the pharmaceuticals that he was on before. And he came to the realization that he could really help other people going through similar situations that he had gone through. So as a result, he began his entrepreneurial journey, ended up starting Windansea, which is a coffee and tea company that's focused on promoting natural wellness products that are effective and taste great. But Jordan's mission goes beyond just the bottom line, and he actually donates 3% of his annual revenue to a nonprofit called One More Wave, a San Diego-based nonprofit that helps vets heal through surf therapy. And overall, a really insightful conversation, especially for someone with a military background and becoming an entrepreneur. And he actually talked about how the military prepared him for entrepreneurship, but also how to be a great entrepreneur. Sometimes you need to add your own creative twist. To hear about that, tune in. So enjoy my conversation with Jordan. Jordan, what's up, my man? Welcome to the podcast.
What's up, brother? How are you? Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Dude, so excited to have you. And first and foremost, I really wanted to say thank you for your service and everything that you've done. And, love our veterans and just want to emphasize that we're appreciative of you guys and should continue to be appreciative of you guys. But here's a little about where I wanted to start. Speaking about being a veteran and serving the military, what did you actually do in the military?
Yeah, so my job in the military was a medic. I was in the U.S. Navy as a corpsman. I worked in special operations, specifically with the Marine Corps, so the MARSOC, special operations, and like recon Marines. And yeah, that was pretty much what I did.
So during your time in the military, I know you actually got injured. If you don't mind me asking, what actually happened there?
Yeah, for sure. So, in training, you're doing a lot of like rucking, swimming, hiking, weightlifting, just stuff like this. Just kind of a pretty physically demanding job. And your mindset in it is sort of um, to push past, perceived limits, that a lot of these limits are in your head and that you always kind of have a little bit more to give. And, it's crazy how true that is, for sure. But I also, it's no wonder why it's like people in their 20s that are kind of in these pipelines, because you kind of have the mindset that you're invincible, and your bodies really do, they can handle the load for a little while. But in my case, it wasn't like a gnarly like combat situation or anything. It was just in training, but some combination of rucking, lifting, and just sort of continuous wear and tear and pushing past those things. I woke up one day and I had absolutely no like feeling. I was like lightning down my leg, numbness, tingling, and I knew something was really wrong in my back. It was like the most injured I'd ever felt. And so, yeah, kind of went and got seen, and turned out I had some disc issues going on that were pushing on nerves, and that kind of sidelined my career in special operations and ultimately in the Navy.
Well, sorry to hear about that injury. And, I'm no back doctor, but I know that loosely familiar with some of the, the disc stuff and pressure on the disc.
Yeah.
So sorry that you had to go through that, but, happy to see that you're still with us today. I want to talk about the training for a second. Was military training the hardest thing you've ever had to do?
In the short answer, I would say is kind of, kind of. And when I went through it, it was the hardest thing I'd ever done up until that point. And I'll kind of explain my caveat here in a minute. The training is extremely demanding, both in the acute sense, in that what you're doing, it might be like, let's say, a 2 hour evolution. So, like, it's a block of training. You have multiple of these blocks every single day, and each block's usually around like 2 hours. And so during that 2 hour time period, you're being pushed to, your limit. So, anyone who's done a plank for, 60 seconds or 2 minutes, something like that, how painful it could, like, such a small time frame can be. So now factor that towards like 2 hours, and you're doing, freezing in the Pacific Ocean, getting chafed up by the sand, doing log PT, boat PT, just like very, very grueling stuff. So in the acute sense, it's definitely hard. But I think what's a bit of a misconception is a lot of people, more people than you think, could probably do any one evolution by itself. As long as you're like in fairly good shape and like a healthy young person. Really, it's a marathon though. It's day in, day out, breakfast, lunch, and dinner, from 3:30 when you wake up in the morning to your 4 o'clock muster until your 6 or 7 o'clock. Like, you're deconning the equipment, you're getting ready, and then you got to go home and you got to prep all of your stuff because you have a gear inspection the next day. And so, and that they're going to find something to fail you intentionally for that gear inspection. And it's just knowing that you have like months of this, like 6 months, day in, day out. I think that is sort of like the mental, like, grueling thing. And in that sense, it was like, yes, definitely one of the hardest thing up in my life up until that point. The next, I think, what makes it simple and where I caveat that is, in training, your life is fairly simple. You know what I mean? Like, you kind of know what's expected of you. You know what you got to do. They tell you what to wear, where to go, when to be there, what to bring, what you're doing. You know it's going to end at some point. And so even though it's really, really challenging, on some level, it's simple. Now, fast forward to business where, yeah, I mean, I'm super comfortable, especially working for myself. Like, I don't have to, I can wake up whenever I want. I'm not in a morning commute to traffic. I could stop working in an hour and go surf the rest of the day. In that sense, it's like in the acute and the physical sense, yeah, it's a piece of cake. But what's like drives you crazy and what's so difficult is your problems are ambiguous, they're open-ended, they're dynamic, there's no right answer, there's no one to help you, there's no, and everything is existential. You don't know if this month is going to be the last month, if this is going to be the last year. Are we going to get that account? Is everything going to, fall to shit the next day? So that type of stuff, I would say it's an interesting dynamic, but that's how I would differentiate the two.
So to draw a parallel between the two, actually, because I love how you said at the end how you would differentiate them, but to think about serving in the military and then running a business, two different things, two similar things, some people would say.
Sure.
But when you're in the military, definitely more operational. When you're an entrepreneur, definitely more creative. But where I want to draw a parallel here, and I want to ask you about the parallel. Do you think that that military thing can be conditioned over time, where over time you just know what to do, and also in entrepreneurship you can also kind of condition yourself to handle ambiguity?
Absolutely. I think that's so going back to like special operations training, there's a lot of misconceptions about like, people will say things like it's 99% mental, 1% physical, or it's all in your head, or, like just don't quit, like these type of sort of like overly simplistic idioms. And while there's truth to those claims, like there's a kernel of truth in all of those, I believe that military training and special operations stuff, it's a learned skill. All of these things you can get better at. If you suck at running, you can get better at running. If you're struggle, under load, like when you're with a bunch of weight on top of you and moving, and you can get better at that. There's a lot of these things, so it is a trained skill. And in business, it's kind of the same way. It's like any of these facets of business are skills that you can learn and you can train. Another parallel between them, and it's something that has absolutely really served me in creating a business and sort of like my mindset about business, is systems and processes. The military, the army, I wasn't in the army, but the army has like a manual for everything. How to blouse your boots, how to, every single thing it's written down somewhere in the army. That's a bit excessive, but the point is they can take somebody from, they could take a 40-year-old man from the middle of California and an 18-year-old from the middle of Kentucky and put them in the same room for 6 weeks and come out, and they're going to be, moving and shooting and doing all of the things together. And the way that they do that is because the military is, if nothing else, a machine of systems and processes. Now, when you go into business, it is more creative, like you said. It's not as rigid. It's certainly not rigid like the military. But the difference between being self-employed and owning a business is systems and processes. I want to be able to work myself out of the equation, and you can fill in me, you can fill in somebody else, as long as they have, a comparable skill set that they can do my job, or I can train somebody to do a job beneath me and then replace them, and there's order there. So that's one thing that the military does really well that I think translates to business for sure.
So I want to move back to talking about the military for a second and talking about injured veterans. You mentioned that you had an injury. Thinking about injured veterans overall, obviously some get injured maybe in training, some get injured in the battlefield. What do you think the biggest struggles are facing injured veterans today?
Definitely. So I think one of the challenges kind of facing all veterans, but especially facing injured veterans, are the transition out of military service and back into civilian life. Because it doesn't matter if you do 4 years, if you do 1 year, or if you do 20 years, at some point your military career will come to an end. That's like the one thing you can almost certainly guarantee, right?
Everything comes to an end, so.
Yeah, I guess that's fair. But even if you did, a lot of these guys like senior dudes that will retire after like 25, 30 years in the military, they're like in their 50s, dude. They're like, maybe early 60s. We have two people running for president that are going to, and they're almost in their 80s,
Yeah.
so so you have a lot of longevity. There's a life for almost everyone outside of the military. And when you're in the military, you have a sense of purpose. There's a sense of cohesion, brotherhood. Your identity is heavily tied into, what you wear on your chest and what's on your collar lapels and, the culture, all of these things. And then you kind of get thrust back in to civilian life. Now let's talk about injured veterans. A lot of injured veterans, maybe it was a medical transition, or maybe it was just their natural transition, but they have some injuries. They were losing their community, they're losing their identity, they're losing all of these things. And so it's really challenging for people to get that sense and to build that community back in the civilian world.
Definitely a tough transition, but I know, and we'll get some to get into some of this a little bit later. Awesome that you're trying to help out really those transition, a lot of those people that are struggling. But I want to talk a little bit about to your specific situation. So when you were recovering from your injury, at that time, what did you learn about plant and holistic medicine?
Yeah, definitely. After I had gotten injured, and especially as a medic, I was very on top of my recovery. And, I was, spearheading my health plan. I was the guy who was making sure that I was meeting the right doctors. I was evaluating all of my options. I was trying to take as little of an invasive approach as possible, before we escalated up to things like surgery. So initially it was a lot of medications that I had been prescribed, physical therapy, obviously, injection, nerve blocks, a variety of different Western interventions like that. And surgery was sort of next on the docket. I had met with the surgeon, we had our MRIs, we had a date planned, and it was actually in one of my physical therapy sessions where there was a guy next to me on one of the tables, and we were just chatting, and he had a similar back injury, and he was post-op from the surgery, and he was back into physical therapy because the scar tissue from the surgery had pushed on his nerves in the same way that his disc was doing. So it just kind of showed me that surgery it's not like a quick fix. It's not a sure thing. I've heard a saying is there's no such thing as a good back surgery. There's just less bad back surgeries, So when it put that in perspective, I was like, dude, first of all, I don't know if I want to go there just yet. I can always get one later. I can't unget one. And I've tried everything, dude. I've tried everything that you guys have to give to me. I'm shoveling handfuls of pills into my mouth, getting all these weird side effects. I'm dealing with all of the psychological, emotional issues that are associated with, like I said, losing my job, losing my community, feeling like I'm a failure, feeling like I'm weak, feeling like I'm less than, which all the medication they're giving you for my back isn't addressing those concerns, so, but if I bring those up to my psychologist or psychiatrist, I'm sure they'll throw some more pills at me to do. And so I kind of had this aha moment, if this is going to be the rest of my life, dude, I don't want it. I don't want it to be this. I don't want to be a salty veteran over at the VA hospital yelling at the pharmacist, because they changed my prescription or I can't get enough of my pills. And I've seen that happen in person, and it's sad. It really is. You're like, damn, dude. Anyway, so I had made a decision that I want to figure out if I'm going to have to manage this one way or another, I'd like to manage it in a way that is sustainable. And so I started looking at various plant medicines, a group of plants called adaptogens, which I can get into, but I'll let you kind of hop in and ask me any follow-ons.
Yep, I want to ask you about adaptogens a little bit later. Just want to talk about your experience with those prescriptions a little bit. When you were on those prescriptions and those pills, how did you feel physically and mentally?
I felt not great. To an extent, they would help with certain things. I was dealing with nerve pain, so they would help mitigate the nerve pain. They would help deal with some inflammation. They would help deal with muscle tightness and sleep and all these things. But what you kind of realize is that the Western medical approach, especially approaching it from like pharmacology, is it really tries to diagnose a specific like ailment, like a really specific part of your body, and then address that. Okay. You're dealing with nerve pain, we'll give you nerve meds. You're dealing with muscle tightness, we'll give you muscle meds. It's not really looking at the holistic system, like why are you dealing with that nerve pain? Maybe there's a muscle imbalance or some sort of weakness, and that's kind of what physical therapy can address. But at that level, it was just very like an inch deep in terms of like how far we're really getting into this. And the easy thing is just let's throw a bunch of pills at it. And so you're getting a little bit of relief, but with everything, there's a side effect. My vision was getting blurry, it's upsetting my stomach. I'm getting like my gut lining is bad. I have to go and get periodic, lab samples to make sure that my kidney functions are still good, my liver's, and I'm 30 years old. Like, I don't want to do this for the rest of my life. At the time I was like 20, I'm 33 now. So at the time I was like 26, and I'm like, this can't be the rest of my life.
So talking about that transition from, we'll say, Western medicine to more holistic medicine, stuff that's a little more pure, what'd you notice about your mood and maybe specifically your lab testing as you moved more towards this kind of medicine?
For sure. So one thing that I noticed was, and I try to be careful to not make like medical claims and to try, like, I don't want people to stop taking your medicine and just go buy some, supplements on Amazon. I just want to put that caveat out there. So this is not medical advice. But what I found personally was I was getting a lot of the same types of, anti-inflammation with things like CBD, turmeric. You would get sleep support with things like reishi mushroom, which have like hypnotic effects. So you could sort of still kind of piece together all of these, like, hey, I'm not sleeping well, I'm in pain, that whatever, and you could address those symptoms naturally. I felt like I was having fewer side effects. I wasn't, my vision wasn't feeling weird, and overall, I liked that what I was taking was natural. Now, it's important poison oak is natural, so just because something grows from the ground doesn't mean that it necessarily is good for you or better than something else. But do think that largely speaking, if you can stick to just like eating food, what food is good for you, highly processed foods or whole foods that are, more natural in the way they occur growing. It's a paradigm that generally speaking makes sense and is true. So going about that, I'm like, if I'm going to be doing this for the rest of my life or managing something, I'm going to do it as naturally and non-invasively as I can.
So thinking back to your career a little bit and that direction that you just mentioned to be able to pursue that path, and looking behind you, you actually have a few business degrees, but you ended up pursuing something more in holistic wealth or holistic, well, you could say holistic wealth too, I guess, because health is wealth. I'll leave that. But
Sure.
you ended up pursuing something in a more sciencey type of field. Obviously, you had that business background, but how did you go about learning more about this holistic stuff and then really marrying the two to create what your company is today?
For sure. So I am like definitely a bit of a nerd. I get really obsessed with certain things and I like deep dive them, and then I kind of go all out. And that's how I was with medicine while I was in, the role of a special operations medic. By the time you are fully like in your role, you're at a team and you're doing all this stuff, you're steeped in some medicine, anatomy, physiology, pharmacology, you're pushing meds, life support, like a lot of stuff. So I got really into kind of the body, the systems of the body, how that works. And then on top of that, you're also an athlete. You're like a top tier, elite athlete. You got to be able to run super fast, have really high endurance. And so you're also kind of coming at it from like a performance science background. How do I perform better in the long run when I'm tired and yada yada. So that was kind of where my mindset was in the military. And when I was transitioning out, I was honestly looking into a career in medicine because I enjoyed it. But what I did not enjoy about my career in medicine or the times in medicine was the like rotations and stuff that we would do through hospitals. I just hated the hospital. I thought it was like just the worst possible working environment. It was just depressing and smelled weird, and just everything about it. It just was like I did not like being there. And so I'm getting out now of the military, and I'm looking to use my GI Bill to go back to school and figure out what I want to do. And I'm like, yeah, maybe I'll go be a PA or a doctor of physical therapy or like something like that. And I'm looking at the career, like the amount of what schooling I would have had to go back to. Now, I had my bachelor's in finance. That was my undergraduate degree. And because that was like a business degree, I would have had to go back and get like basically an associate's degree, do all this like organic chemistry,
Too much.
all this stuff. And then like for what, dude? So I can go work in a hospital? Like I'm good. So that was kind of like a change. And then, there was potentially the option of like firefighting or something like that, which is a little bit more like exciting and kind of closer to the military service. But I mean, my body was still messed up. Like I'm like, I don't, if I'm going to let my team down in the military, what, I'm going to let the fire station down now? So, there was elements of that, of just sort of like, I don't know exactly what I'm going to do or what I'm even can do, in the short term. So, why don't I go back to school for business? Because that's, I can at least hop into grad school. And while I'm in school, I can figure out what exactly I want to do and what direction I kind of want to move in.
So, as a CPG entrepreneur, where do you think that most holistic wealth and holistic health products fall short?
Hmm. I think there's a couple ways I could sort of take this. I think one of which is there is a tendency to want to kind of promote your product as like a magic bullet, or if you get really into something, then that just is like you're just pushing that thing and it's the answer to all things. And I think in the supplement space and in sort of the alternative health space, there is a lot of that. People who are drunk on their own Kool-Aid, and they believe that like their thing, or whatever product it is the answer to all the questions. So I think that's one area that they get it wrong. Whereas I believe very much, I mean, in like functional mushrooms, science supports this. My own experience supports this. I anecdotal support this, but it's just one thing, dude. It's one thing in a holistic lifestyle approach. You should also evaluate, how you're sitting, what chair you're sitting on, the pillow you're using, what are you doing during the day, what foods are you eating. It's a full pronged approach. So number one is that no magic bullets. Number two is, at least in the like CPG wellness coffee space, because I can speak kind of like to that. I see a lot of, there are companies like Mudwater, Rise, Four Sigmatic. These are some of our big competitors, and I've tried all of them. I go anytime I see a new one online, I buy it and I make it at home, and I give it my honest
Like Dave
opinion.
Portnoy's pizza reviews, except Jordan's coffee reviews. Ryan, you
Yeah.
call it Ryan's reviews. That could be another
Dude, that's
subsidiary,
actually
yeah.
like that's a great idea, because I'm always like trying to find more content, and that's actually probably what I should
Like
be doing.
Ryan's reviews here. Today we're at and then this coffee
Yeah.
is 7.5. I like
Yeah,
this.
yeah,
I don't like this. But
7.5. People stopping me in the street.
yeah.
No, but one thing that I have found is that while some of these products are very effective, like they have the benefits, they're not yanking your chain, like they taste awful. They're so bad, and so it's really sort of like, hey, I know. Like the mushrooms are good for you, or you're going to get benefits. I know it tastes bad, but hold your nose and drink it, and you'll feel better. You'll thank us later. And I think that is a fine approach for some people. But for me personally, like I love coffee. I'm into coffee culture. I enjoy, coffee like wine, kind of. And so for me, it was important to marry the benefits of this holistic wellness product in a coffee product that I actually like wanted to drink. So that would be kind of another thing. I guess I can probably go on, but I'd have to think.
So speaking about that, your company called Windansea. By the way, I love the name. Maybe a nod to the Navy, but ultimately Windansea. Why did you decide to start a coffee and tea company?
Yeah. Well, quick thing on the name. So Windansea is actually a beach here in La Jolla, and it's a super iconic like surf beach. There's old article from like Andy Warhol, where he wrote about how it was like one of the most like iconic, surf beaches in all America. So anyway, why I wanted to get into coffee and tea is while I did figure out, hey, holistic wellness, adaptogen, plant medicine, this is cool. I'm enjoying it. I'm getting benefits. I would still go and I'd buy these supplements. They would sit in my supplement cabinet. There was nothing particularly aspirational or, interesting about them. It was capsules, tinctures, some generic like wellness sounding brand. And sometimes I'd forget to take them, sometimes, or I'd get like a mushroom tincture. Let's say it was like an alcohol based tincture, and I'd put it underneath, my tongue. You're supposed to go and burn my mouth. It would taste awful. And I'm like, well, I sure hope I get the benefits from this thing. So, whereas coffee and tea, especially coming from a military background, like nicotine and caffeine is what like fuels our nation's wars, basically, you know, and so I never needed a reminder to drink my coffee. It was something I always looked forward to, and there's even though we don't necessarily like frame it this way in our Western culture, everyone goes through a ritual in the morning, your morning routine, right? So you get up, maybe you brush your teeth, you do a little yoga, you go and make your coffee. There's something that is routine-like and ritualistic about that. And so my thought was rather than having to, remember to take this additional step during your day, what if you could habit stack with something that you're already doing and make it aspirational and that you look forward to it and you're representing something that you support, So that was
For,
kind of why there.
for sure. I definitely have my morning routine, and I always make I don't know what you think about this coffee, but I always make my Trader Joe's instant Colombian coffee. So I'm no
How is
coffee
it?
aficionado, but it's pretty good. I like it.
Yeah, cool.
But
That's good to know.
yeah, but for the,
I know that instant coffees are getting better these days because that was sort of, like Folgers is an instant coffee in a MRE, which is like the little bag food
meal
that you
ready
get.
kit. Yep.
Yeah. They comes with like, little tiny Tabasco sauce, and then it comes with a little packet of instant coffee. So a lot of instant coffee is crap. I just saw Blue Bottle actually has like a craft instant coffee that they just came out with. So it's becoming a bigger trend actually nowadays. So I haven't tried that one, but I wouldn't be surprised if it was okay.
It's solid. I mean, what do I know? I just saw like Trader Joe's Colombian instant. I was like, okay, like this one looks good. So for me, it might be tasty, but for you, it's like kind of has a little more of an accustomed taste for it. Well, we'll have to see. You'll have to let me know. But
I'll send you some. I'll send you
yeah,
some.
let me let
You
me know.
can.
I appreciate that. So we're talking a little about coffee and tea companies and kind of some of the health benefits some have. Some try to sell themselves like a magic bullet. Some just try to say that they're better than the rest. But thinking overall, where do you think that most of these coffee and tea companies fall short when it comes to holistic health?
So, well, I think there's a couple ways you can take that one too. So, for example, like Mudwater and Rise, they are big coffee alternatives. Caffeine is having kind of a negative time in the
Like
spotlight right
connotation.
now. Yeah. People are so like, oh, caffeine, because what they're recognizing is that caffeine spikes your cortisol production, which is like your stress hormone. So, you drink this, it also has a very long half life. So even though you're feeling like the crash or whatever from your coffee, let's say 2 hours after you drink it, there's still caffeine in your system that's being processed. So if you drink coffee too late at night, it can kind of create that cycle where it's really hard to, you go to sleep and then you drink more coffee the next day. So caffeine right now is kind of having a negative time in the spotlight. But what people forget is that caffeine is one of the oldest known nootropics that people have been consuming for its nootropic benefit, in history. we like it because it increases your alertness, it increases your blood flow, it actually improves athletic performance. So caffeine is not like just a bad thing, but it can be bad in certain contexts. That's one thing where it's like, also here's a crazy statistic: 3 in 4 Americans had coffee yesterday. Coffee was the number one beverage. Raised, it was above tap water and bottled water. It is the number one drink that Americans drink on a daily basis. Anytime there's I think something like 40% of coffee users have tried to cut back on their coffee drinking. But of those, 70% of those could not make it past 30 days. So a lot of kind of random statistics, but what I'm trying to say is that at the end of the day, people love coffee. They keep coming back to it. They like it because of the taste, because of the smell, because of the culture, because of the ritual, because of all of those things. So while I think it's great that there are companies out there offering alternatives for people who are like, hey, I'm not into it, or matcha is a perfect example. It has like an L-theanine rather than a caffeine, and so that is a different form of energy, and people enjoy that. So it's great that there are alternatives to coffee. For everybody else, we want coffee. We just don't want all of the baggage that comes with the caffeine, all those negative side effects, and creating that cycle where you're just continuously exhausted and overcaffeinated, stressed out, crash, rather rinse, repeat.
So, unpopular opinion, but do you think that coffee is something that actually people actually like, or do you think it's just an acquired taste that people get over time?
I think it's I think it's a little bit of both. I think if you were to give coffee to an 8-year-old, like black coffee, for example, they'd probably think it's bitter and kind of doesn't taste super good. If you give them like a frappuccino or something like that, they'd probably like that. And I do think that even adults are kind of that way. It seems like everyone's gateway into liking coffee is probably through some sugary drink or like a coffee flavored ice cream or, a mocha, fill in the blank. And then as you get older or whatever your context is, you're cool with just straight black coffee. So it's a little bit of both, but I definitely think, like, I personally love the flavor of coffee, and I love how much variety and how it can be like wine in the depth of flavors that you get.
So, as a coffee entrepreneur, how do you prepare your coffee?
This is You're gonna be real disappointed. Right now, I basically just do a drip machine. I'm pretty lame, but I have gone down the pour over rabbit hole. Dialing in my grind size, measuring the exact number of grams of water that you're going to use, and trying to get the perfect bloom and doing all this stuff. And I have tremendous appreciation for that, but I also am like, I'm trying to wake up. Like, I'm not ready to like do the science experiments, to then wake up. I need the caffeine first, and then maybe we can. I saw this post a little while back, and it was like a joke post, but it was really funny because it's so true. It was like showing like a coffee shop in LA, and you had the barista, and he's like spinning the thing, and he's making sure that there's like the perfect amount of grounds in this little puck, and that's perfectly even, and he has the just right the amount of force, and he's doing like all this like ridiculous like super super fine tuning. And then it was like baristas in Italy, and they're like, and he's just like slamming it in there, hitting the puck, hitting the butter, so very different coffee cultures. One isn't wrong and the other one right. It's just, you go to Europe and cafes often don't even have chairs. It's like espresso is something you drink at the bar. There's no a million different beverage options. It's like one shot, two shot, cappuccino, or like get out of here kind of deal. You throw some change on the counter and you sip it and go. Whereas, in here, we really like going into the experimentation of all the different ways you can make your drinks and stuff like that. So it's cool how much variety there is.
Yeah, well, we'll leave the cultures to themselves. So we know good and bad and everything, but definitely I'll have to try that Italian espresso one time. But to get into some of your products specifically, so one of the things that you have, which I thought was really cool, is coffee beans, which are kind of mixed in with hemp. So to get a little high level here, still for whatever reason, a lot of people confuse hemp and marijuana itself. So what's the main difference between the two?
Yeah, that misconception is one that I have dealt with my entire career in this industry, and it's been very tough. Cannabis is a plant. You can grow the way that it's kind of like talked about is there's marijuana and then there's hemp, industrial hemp, right? So hemp can be made into fibers, ropes, textiles, a bunch of different things. Marijuana is typically cultivated for its high THC content. So THC is the cannabinoid that makes you feel high, makes you simulates that high feeling. But within the cannabis plant, there are numerous cannabinoids. There's CBD, which is the other one that is found more readily in hemp, but there's CBN, there's CBG, there's a bunch of other cannabinoids that are found in trace amounts. Where it gets conflated is, technically speaking, it is the same plant, but how it's prepared and how it's sort of grown is for different purposes, and there's even different classifications. So if your cannabis plant it has less than 0.3% THC, that's considered an industrial hemp product. It's federally legal. It's not a scheduled substance. It's legal in all 50 states. CBD has basically all of the benefits of medicinal marijuana, medical marijuana, just without the psychoactive THC component. Cannabinoids, there's this thing called the entourage effect. And so you get the most benefit from cannabinoids by having a little bit of THC, a little bit of CBD, a little bit of all of them. This goes back to what we were saying about why whole foods, you're going to get processed foods that have lower nutritional value than a whole food. So the same thing's kind of true with cannabis. If you isolate the CBD molecule, you will have zero THC, zero of the other cannabinoids, but you're also going to get a little bit lower of the medicinal properties than if you had what they call full spectrum CBD, for example. But that's the main difference. THC makes you high, CBD makes you not high.
Got it. So I appreciate the explanation there because I'm also no expert in this area. So I appreciate you
Yeah,
kind of breaking down the difference, especially as someone that does this stuff for a living. But in short, CBD is what really makes you kind of that relaxed feeling, that more kind of chill vibes, easier to fall asleep, that kind of thing.
definitely. If you want to get one level deeper into the science about what's going on in your body, why cannabis is such a crazy thing is we have receptors in our brain and body that are designed to react with cannabinoids. So we have your CB1 and CB2 receptors in your brain. And now it's not just for cannabis products. It's also it processes endorphins when you get a runner's high. A lot of these things, those also enact on your CB1 and CB2. But what those two, what did I call them? CB2 sensors? I'm blanking on the term. What they do is they help keep your body, receptors, that's the term. They help keep your body in what's called homeostasis. And homeostasis is essentially equilibrium. It's that feeling that hey, I'm not stressed, I'm sleeping okay, I'm not having an inflammatory reaction. Sometimes when people have eczema, that's an inflammatory issue. Rheumatoid arthritis, that's an inflammatory issue. What we're kind of discovering about a lot of these chronic inflammation diseases, it's your body being out of balance, out of homeostasis. So cannabinoids can actually work on those receptors and help bring your body back into a state of balance, which is that state of relaxation. It's sleeping better, better digestion, all the above.
So they bring you back to level, basically.
Yeah, yeah.
So you mentioned something called adaptogens earlier. So for someone like me who I don't think I've ever heard the word adaptogen, what is an adaptogen?
Yeah, sure. So an adaptogen essentially is a plant, herb, root, or fungus that helps your body adapt to external stressors. So adaptogens help you adapt. Easy way of kind of remember it. Now, if you think about adaptogens, it's like an umbrella term. Underneath that umbrella, you'll have things like functional mushrooms. So functional mushrooms would be, reishi, chaga, cordyceps, lion's mane, turkey tail, maitake. There's a million of them. Even shiitake mushrooms are a functional mushroom. And that's an important distinction. I just want to zoom in for a second because people, I've had this happened just the other day. I gave somebody a bag of the mushroom coffee, and they're like, "Oh, mushroom coffee? Sorry, I work for a federal job. I can't drink this." And I had to say, "Hey, if you look on the back, one of the medicinal mushrooms, shiitake mushrooms. This is no different than like eating mushrooms. You wouldn't worry about eating, shiitake mushrooms or a portobello or, anything like that because of your federal job. So you don't need to worry about it with this. But underneath that umbrella of adaptogens, you have functional mushrooms. You also have things like ashwagandha, ginkgo biloba, cannabis, a number of these different substances. And all that they do is they kind of help your body regulate what's called your HPA axis, your hypopituitary adrenal axis. And that is the part that manages your stress. Hey, there's a tiger coming. Let's, jack up some adrenaline. Okay. Hey, our parasympathetic nervous system's going now. Rest, digest. It's modulating those two things. And so adaptogens kind of help your body modulate those.
Got it. I appreciate all the explanation there. You learn something new every day. So,
I learned all this in business school. No, I'm just kidding.
You learn more in the school of hard knocks and entrepreneurship.
Dude, 100%, man. You really do. You really do.
So talking about Windansea, so technically, at a broad level, you're more of a consumer products, goods, holistic health company. And as you've probably learned, the consumer product space is competitive as hell.
Yeah.
What kind of marketing approach did you take to really pursue that market or really break into it?
It's so tough, dude. It's also really tough. I mean, trying to bootstrap your way up, it really makes a difference if you can, if you got seed round of like $1.2 million, that's something that you can really use to go acquire a customer's direct to consumer online. So we kind of have a two-pronged approach. We have our D2C, so direct to consumers through our website, and then our B2B, which includes wholesaling to like grocery stores where they retail our product. Also coffee shops, which are doing super well. That's like crushing it right now with our powders. And then some white label clients. So white label are just like, hey, you want to make mushroom coffee, or you have a brand, but you don't know how to make mushroom coffee. We'll make it for you and you can sell it on your own. Obviously D2C is kind of where like you make this product, you're like, oh, I'm going to go sell it online to all my friends. And you do that. But one thing that I kind of learned the hard way is you are just like an island in the middle of the ocean. You can have an amazing product. You can have a great story. You can be extremely passionate about what you do. And it's really hard still to drive traffic to that website. So the B2B approach has been for like my 2024 strategy has been really focused on how do we build a strong foundation in business to business, because these are more relationship based and higher volume. So yes, you're making lower margin. Daniel, you own a coffee shop. Me and you are cool. You like our product. Now you go do all the hard work of getting consumers into your coffee shop. I'll be a vendor and I'll make sure that you are stocked up, that your staff is trained, that it's being promoted, etc. So that's been kind of just like on an operational standpoint. But I think your original question was about from a marketing standpoint. And one thing that we've had to really approach our product as is the mushroom coffee for coffee lovers. Not just trying to sell you that the mushrooms are good for you, because they are, and there's a lot of products out there with mushrooms that are good for you. But we're a coffee company. We're first and foremost going to give you a product that you're going to enjoy drinking, that's organic, that we know the farm that it came from, we know the process that was made. Everything from the mushroom side is grown organically, domestically in Oregon. Anyway, so a lot of attention has sort of gone into the process, and coming at it from like hey, we want to make a coffee for coffee lovers. But also, I think a beachhead strategy that we've really kind of looked at is I think the veteran community is underserved in terms of holistic wellness products. So you may be familiar with Black Rifle coffee. I don't know if you.
Loosely, maybe. I'm
Yeah,
not,
so
I'm not entirely sure.
Black Rifle Coffee is a company that they've been around for a little while, but they blew up in the last probably like around like I don't know, probably 2016, maybe a little bit sooner than that, around that time. And they were making these like kind of viral videos. There were, they'd have guys, like shooting machine guns like in the back of like a pickup truck. It'd be like slow motion and, just sort of like aggro, like hardcore Americana, like stuff like that. And it was very much catering to a certain demographic and like even political ideation of consumer. So, yes, good coffee, okay, but it's really about who we're trying to approach with that strategy. I try looking at what Windansea is doing as if Black Rifle is all the cool stuff you did overseas, blowing stuff up and, jumping out of planes and doing all that stuff. Windansea is about when you come back home. It's about, taking care of you, getting you back to a place where you can transition back into society and be a functional, productive member and that you can do so healthily. So I feel very privileged to be in Southern California where stuff like, yoga, sound baths, holistic health, ayahuasca, psychedelic research, these type of things are sort of like taken for granted. But if you're a veteran who maybe you're from Kentucky or something and you come out here and then you go back to Kentucky and you don't have those options, I want to normalize, educate, and advocate holistic health for veterans. So that's kind of another marketing approach that we're taking.
To focus more on kind of return back to life and kind of reintegrate and kind of level yourself, in comparison to what it was in the military.
Yeah, totally.
So thinking more about entrepreneurship here broadly, and we spoke about this a little earlier, but you learn a lot building your own company. What's been the hardest entrepreneurial lesson that you've had to learn so far?
That there's not always a right answer, and you're sort of you're just wandering in the dark sometimes, and you can ask people and you can find mentors and you can have a strong team of advisors or 4 business degrees. You can do all of these things and they help. They're absolutely, I don't mean to trash higher education or mentorship or any of that stuff. You absolutely need it. But at the end of the day, no one cares about your company as much as you do. No one is going to be as motivated to build the dream as you are. There's not necessarily a one way or a right way to do it. It's sort of just trial and error. And can you survive another day? Because if you pack up and go get a job or do something else, well, then that is the legacy of your business.
Got it. So you have to just figure out day by day for sure. I can definitely feel that on a personal basis. Thinking earlier also to the CPG brand space, and you've been able to be successful so far, and hopefully will continue to, I guess no pun intended, but go to war every day and be successful. Thinking about the beginning before you started all this and everything you know now, what do you think you wish, or what do you wish you knew on day one that would have helped you kind of, we'll say, streamline the path to scale?
Well, from a very tactical point of view, I would have not jumped as heavily into the CBD space. I am a personal advocate of cannabis. It has been transformed in my life. I believe in it as a product. It is like smashing your face against the wall every day trying to operate and scale a CBD brand. So that's one thing on a tactical basis. If I could go back, I would be a little bit more wary or just more careful about how you do it. Because, I lost my PayPal. I got blocked on Amazon. I got blocked on Facebook. I got blocked on everything just because I've, treated like a drug dealer. You've probably heard like the Facebook adage of, move fast, break things. I think now it's just like move fast. But I would almost come at it from the opposite point of view is the things that I moved quickly into. And, I rushed a label drop. I rushed a product release. I rushed a marketing strategy, or I went into, those were always the times where I learned something from that, but I probably could have learned if I had just taken a little bit more time beforehand. What's the rush, dude? It's a marathon. Like, yeah, you got to be. It's a balance, I suppose, because you want to be quick to market. Timing does matter, but if you're strapped for cash, you got to be throwing nickels like they're manhole covers, and you will waste a lot more money by rushing into a half-baked idea than by like thinking about it a little bit. And so that's probably one thing. Just try to slow down a little bit and think before you make a decision.
Would you also agree with the idea that it's more a feeling than a formula that you're following?
For sure, absolutely. I would say so. That kind of goes back to that first point about how like there's not really like a right answer, and it's tough too because you can go talk to somebody who's smarter than you, more successful than you, has done what you've done, and who you respect, and you can get their insight on something, and they can just be totally wrong. They can just be the what you should actually do is the exact opposite of what they just said, and that is tough. And so following your gut, that, kind of talking about military stuff as well, I really do believe in your gut feeling, and it shouldn't be the only deciding factor. You need to take in a lot of different data points, but if something feels weird in your gut, trust that instinct and then reverse engineer why maybe you got there after the fact. There's this book called The Gift of Fear by Gavin DeBecker. I don't know if you've ever heard this guy, but he's a former like FBI something. And what he did is he did this big study and determined that gut instinct will save your life more than it's a repeatable, like verifiable, observable fact that when people don't trust their gut instinct because they don't want to be, I don't want to act like I'm judging this person, or that's when something bad usually happens. So it just really kind of reinforces that your feeling is important.
Definitely go with your gut. I love that.
Go with your
So,
gut, man.
thinking about some of the people that you've been serving, especially the veterans, what product feedback have you heard from a lot of your customers?
Yeah. Flavor being one of them, just being like, wow, this is a really good product. I've had, again, not medical advice, but this is a real anecdote that someone told me. So they had bought a bag of our Loco Mocha, which is like a mushroom infused like hot cocoa mix. I make it with coffee, like a mocha mix, but anyway, this person bought that. They'd been using it for maybe like a week or so, and then they came back and they were like, "Dude, can I get another bag of that?" I want to. I gave, so they used half of that first bag. They said while they were using it, they're like, I probably took half as much Adderall as they had usually done prior to that. And they're like, and I'm not ripping my jewel all day because I'm like, cracked out on Adderall trying to get that nicotine fix. So he's like, I just felt better at the end of the day because I wasn't on taking so much Adderall and I wasn't hitting my jewel. So I gave my mom the rest of the bag. His mom was dealing with Alzheimer's. I didn't know any of this. And he said, my mom's been drinking it for about the past week, and she told me that when she's taking it, she says she feels less Alzheimer-y, whatever that means. That was just like a really cool. They didn't have to, they could have said, hey man, thanks, like love it. Could have said nothing, could have done whatever. But to get a repeat buy because they're like, not only am I taking less amphetamine and nicotine, but it's helping my mom, deal with her like Alzheimer's better. Like you're really impacting people's lives. It's not just like another photo sharing app or something, something that is, it feels good to be doing something that affects people's health, their longevity, and their lives.
Definitely great to get that feedback. Well, to move into a little more high level here, we talked earlier about the military and some parallels with business, but how would you say that the military helped you prepare for entrepreneurship?
So what? Okay, systems and processes, that being important. Another thing, this was kind of funny. It motivated me to never work for another employer again. Working for a big bureaucratic organization like the military, or just anyone in general, but like especially like just my personality and kind of the way I am, it was a big motivator to be like I gotta do my own way, kind of going forward. That's my way or the highway. So that was one. But another thing is just like straight up resilience, discipline, perseverance. It's tough, man. I mean, there are days I've cried on my girlfriend's freaking shoulder. I had an intern one time. This is kind of embarrassing, but I had an intern recently, and I was going through just some really stressful stuff with work. I don't even remember specifically what it was, but I had like our intern meeting that day. He asked me how it was going. It was like a really like sincere like, how are you doing? And it just like hit me in a weird way, and like I kind of like started like welling up, and I was just like, it's hard, dude. I'm having a hard day. It's not always easy. So the military kind of ingrained that like you can handle this, like you're okay, you've done really hard stuff before, you've survived, you're gonna get through this. Just put one foot in front of the other. There are times in training where like kind of the mindset would be like get to the next meal. So if you wake up and you're getting out of bed and you're like, oh my god, I don't want to start today, this is gonna be the worst day ever, like just get to breakfast, dude. Just get to breakfast. And then you get to breakfast and you start your first evolution. You're doing that stuff, and you're like, "When's lunch? Lunch is in a couple hours, dude. We can make it to lunch. Lunch is at 12." And before you know it, 3 weeks go by, and all you've been counting is the meals. So there's stuff like that where it's like the enormity and the totality of like, am I going to be able to? Is my business going to succeed? Am I going to fail? What's going to go on? Who knows? But if you can take it into bite-sized chunks, just let's get like one or two things done today. Let's just we showed up, we did it. That's something that really something that was reinforced by my military training.
Yeah, but I definitely feel that some days can be really hard for sure, and a lot of times you have to put one foot in front of the other. So I appreciate you sharing those moments.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask on a parting note here, something that you do that I think is really cool and really awesome of you guys is you donate 3% of your revenue to a nonprofit called One More Wave. At the end of the day, what do you hope your lasting impact is going to be on the veteran community?
So it's something kind of interesting that while I was in, I've always been patriotic. I love my country. I loved being in the military. But like while you're in, you're kind of like I said, you're like why are we doing this stupid stuff? My boss is dumb. I work with this guy. He's dumb. You can get kind of like jaded on it as an organization. And then until you lose it, until it's gone. And then you kind of like recognize like, whoa, those people were some of the most like humble, hardworking, self-sacrificing, service-oriented people that I've ever met. And a lot of them come from really humble beginnings and humble backgrounds, and they're there to serve. So I definitely gained a new appreciation sort of after the fact for this community. And I recognized that a business could have more of an impact than me just as an individual could. The first thing was, and this is actually something I kind of learned in training too, is that when you're going through training and you're doing hard stuff, it's really easy to feel sorry for yourself and be like thinking about like, oh my god, this is so hard, I'm in so much pain, me, I want to stop, I'm tired, I'm cold, I'm this. Once you start reframing that to be like, who's struggling, who can I help out? Oh, that dude's like lagging. Let me go give him a little hand, see if I can give him a push. As soon as you kind of take your focus away from you and me and feeling sorry for me, and you start looking towards other people, all of a sudden you get like new springs of energy. And where did this come from? You kind of get like a second wind. And so it was something that I kind of recognized in business as well, is I don't have any money. I'm trying to make this product. Everything's so expensive. I don't know what I'm doing. Everything's so hard. Okay, why don't you, instead of focusing on how sorry you feel for your business, why don't you think, what can I do with my business? What's the purpose? No, who's a community that I care about, that I want to impact, that, and how can I take what I have and use that to make the biggest impact in that community? And when you start doing things like that, I mean, there would be people that would reach out to me on Instagram that would be like, hey, I'm a tattoo artist over in Belfast, Ireland, and I want to do a piece for you guys because I heard what you're doing with, One More Way. I think that's super cool. So it's like the universe really does sort of, it wants to help people that are helping people. And so that was sort of my lasting impact, is I want to be somebody that is remembered for being an advocate, an educator, and a community builder for the veteran community and holistic health.
The universe works in mysterious ways, but I definitely think that there is definitely truth and a vibe to what you're talking about. But Ryan, it's been an absolute blast. I absolutely love what you're doing with Windansea, and thanks so much for taking the time to tell your story, brother.
Thank you, Daniel. I appreciate you, brother. Thank you so much.
Thanks for listening to my conversation with Jordan Ryan. I have a quick favor to ask you. Please subscribe to the podcast. The more subscribers we have, the more we can invest in the show, and the better all the content will be, and the more value I'll be able to provide to you, my audience. So thank you for all your support, and I'll see you next time.